I have the biggest smile on my face today because something that I've been looking forward to for a very long time is happening today. A conversation that I was envisioning, manifesting, and it's here. I'm talking about Gregg Braden, and the list of his accomplishments is so long. I'll just give you a little bit. He's a 5-time New York Times bestselling author, scientist, educator, and pioneer in the emerging paradigm bridging science, spirituality, social policy, and human potential. Gregg Braden, it's my great honor and pleasure to have you on today. Thank you for coming.
Jean Nolan, I am so excited to be here with you. I'm thrilled to be with your community. Your community is my family, and I'm just honored and thrilled. I've followed your work. I've followed your music for many years, and this is a media week for me. And I get a little Excel spreadsheet that has all my media interviews. And when I looked down and I saw yours, I had a big smile that has lasted now since the beginning of the week. So I'm honored. This is unscripted, of course. We have no idea where this is going to go. It's a dance, my brother. I'm going to follow your lead, and let's just see what happens here.
You have moved through so many worlds and are connecting the dots from those worlds that are seemingly disconnected, but they all belong together. Like you said, the different disciplines, the sciences. As a matter of fact, it is my belief that these disciplines have been disconnected from each other on purpose to compartmentalize knowledge, which makes it harder for the population to realize it's all a connected field, which touches back on what you said is what we really talk a lot about are the two timelines we're currently so clearly seeing. One is this technocratic path that the mainstream is really pushing hard for, and the other one is the organic human timeline, which we're just beginning to rediscover. Like you said, there was intervention 200,000 years ago. In Native American cultures, which is your background too, it's called the gift of the feather, the gift of consciousness that was given that basically put us on a different trajectory. So on this organic timeline, you spoke about extraordinary abilities and what we might be capable of if we give ourselves the time to really rediscover that. And we have people today that are not the gurus that are so foreign oftentimes to our culture. We have the Wim Hofs today that are showing what is not just possible for one person, but basically can be taught and replicated. In your view, what would it take for us right now to, at least for a critical mass, hit that pause button for a little bit on the technocratic path and focus on this organic timeline?
Wow, it's a big question, Jean, and I know we're going to have a big conversation. So, with your permission, what I'd like to do is to answer that by laying a little bit of a foundation that we can tie into. My sense is our time will go quickly, and this may become Jean and Gregg Part 1, and then we can tie back into this and refer to this in future conversations as well. You okay if we do it that way?
I would love that. Please go ahead.
Yeah. So I think I'll begin the timelines that you're talking about are evident because there's a battle unfolding in our lives. And this is no secret to anyone who is with us right now. There's a battle unfolding in plain sight. And there are facets of that battle that are more obvious than others. So for example, we all know there's a battle for our thoughts, and we're being inundated with ways to think. If you are in any way connected through any kind of legacy media or mainstream media, there is a battle for our beliefs. And this is playing out in the universities and the classrooms. Where did the universe come from? How did it begin? Is it random, or is there an intelligent design underlying it? There's a battle for the way we think of ourselves and our origins. Are we the product of lucky biology and completely random mutations, or is there some kind of an intelligent intervention underlying our existence? So there's a battle for our thoughts. There's a battle for our beliefs. There's a battle for our bodies. That's obvious. How do you get healthy? What does it take to stay healthy? How much do we participate, and how much do we empower something outside of ourselves to keep us healthy? We all know about that. Ultimately, John, these are all facets of a deeper battle. And it's a battle that is so obvious. They say the best way to hide something is to keep it in plain sight. And that's exactly what's happening. There is a battle for our very humanness. We are the prize. We are the prize in this ancient battle that has been playing out since humans first emerged. And we all know this as the battle between good and evil, or the battle between light and dark. And it plays out through the technology that's available at the period in time as it's playing out. And we happen to be living a very sophisticated technological age, but that same ancient battle is playing out. The battle for our humanness, and the reason our humanness is on the line, I'm going to use a word and then I'll define this word because it means different things to different people. The reason our humanness is so important is because through our biology, we access our divinity. And this is actually a battle, an ancient battle for our divinity. Now, I just said this on the stage 2 weeks ago, and many people in the audience linked divinity to religion. And I can see why that would happen because we have seen that. I mean, there are schools of divinity that are linked to religion. But if you look at the Webster definition, it's really interesting. Divinity has nothing to do with religion. So let me share what that definition is, and then we'll take it from there. Divinity is the ability to transcend perceived human limitations, and that's it. The ability to transcend. So to become more than not just survive, but to become more than those limitations. And even in the definition, perceived, those limitations may not even be real. They are the limitations that we've been conditioned to accept about ourselves, our relationship to our bodies and the world. So why is the divinity so powerful? And the reason is because when we embrace the deep truth of our divinity, Jean, we are no longer shackled by the bonds of fear that keeps us from the deep truth of ourselves. The events that you're seeing playing out in the world, when we're all seeing it, all this stuff's important. Climate is important, the buckling and the breaking down of the financial systems, the economic systems, social systems, all this, it's all important. It all needs to be talked about. However, it has been weaponized. The events of our world have been weaponized to keep us in fear so that our divinity is veiled. And when we lose access to our divinity, we become vulnerable and susceptible to other people's ideas and their agendas of what the world should look like and what our bodies should look like. So it is in the interest of the powers that be that have alternate agendas and have alternate visions to keep us from our divinity. And one of the most effective ways of doing that is to create fear in a population. And we are inundated every day, even if you don't watch TV. I go to my little local co-op, where I get all my organic produce, and that's where I plug into my local community. And people are frightened because things are happening that have never happened before. There appears to be no remedy. So you can't resolve the fear. You're in perpetual fear. And it threatens everything that people know to be true about their lives, the certainty of life. They cannot plan with certainty their children's education or their retirement, or whether or not they're going to be able to, to help their parents in a nursing home because the prices are so high. All kinds of the certainty that we had in the past has disappeared, and that uncertainty creates a level of panic, anxiety, and fear. So there's a battle for our divinity that's playing out. Now, part of that battle, it's not new. This has happened at least 3 generations in the modern technological world. It's been happening for thousands of years on the spiritual level. We are the product, and I have no children, by the way. I have friends that have children. So what I'm going to say is still being taught in the schools today. Our young people are being taught that the human body is flawed by its very existence, that we are a flawed form of life. Carbon-based life is flawed. And for example, among the flaws, emotion, our ability to emote and to have emotions is considered to be a flaw by these technocratic people that are teaching this, because the emotion clouds our ability to think clearly and to make good decisions. They're teaching our young people that human intimacy and sexuality is flawed, because when a man and a woman conceive a child, there's so much uncertainty. There's no precision. You don't know what you're going to get. You don't know the eye color, the hair color. You don't know fast twitch muscles for athletic performance or what kind of IQ. So we're teaching our young people that the human biology is flawed and that we are victims of a world that we have no control over. And if we're victims, it means we need a savior, and that savior is being touted as technology. And this is the foundation to answer the question that you're asking about now. Our young people are being taught that technology is what will save them. It will give them the edge in life, the ability to compete successfully, and to replace the flawed human biology. When we replace our natural biology with synthetics, when we lose the DNA, which is literally, so this isn't a metaphor, it is literally an antenna. It is a very high frequency antenna that tunes us to our divinity, the timeless, ageless part of us, where our intuition comes from and where our creativity and our imagination come from. That's all done through the biology, the DNA. When you begin to replace the DNA with synthetic polymers and with chemicals, or you alter the DNA that exists, you still have it, but you alter it. It's like taking the dial on your radio station and tuning it just enough so you no longer pick up that station. You no longer tune into your divinity. This is what we're seeing, and it's not like it's going to happen. It's already happening. And it's being done through really effective marketing. I mean, I know it's happening, and I'm still in awe at how slick and sexy the marketing is, the high-tech marketing that appeals to young people, that makes it look really cool to have a computer chip in your brain so that you can communicate with your gaming device without using any wires. They say, man, that's sweet. That's sweet, you know? And so we're living at this pivotal crossroad where in one generation, this can't drag on. It's evolving too quickly. In one generation, we will determine how much of ourselves we give away to technology. And another way of looking at this is we will also determine whether or not we love ourselves enough, Jean, to embrace the deep truth of the gift of our humanness that was given to us 200,000 years ago, and the extraordinary potentials given to no other form of life that we're only beginning to understand. We're about to give it away before we even know what we're giving away.
Exactly.
And so that's what the book Pure Human is really all about. So this is where we are, and how this is playing out now is the answer to your question. There are two parallel societies they're with us right now. There's one group of people that are all in on all the tech, on everything. They're saying, bring it on. I just saw a video of there are European countries that are now requiring RFID chips in the body to get into the security rooms and in offices and for banking and finance. So I just saw this is an extreme. There was one guy that had 34 RFID chips in his body, and he was very proud. He said, look, when I leave the house, I'm free. I don't have to take my billfold, no credit cards. I don't have to remember anything. He says it's great. And this is the way that it's being touted. So there's one group that's all in. And then when I go down to my little co-op here and just outside of Santa Fe, New Mexico, like I said, I don't have any kids. I'm not plugged into the local community in that way. And this is where I get to connect with my neighbors. They don't know everything you and I are talking about because they're busy raising kids, and they're busy trying to keep their farms alive because the government subsidies aren't helping. The climate change isn't helping. The supply chains that are broken down are still broken down in some respects. So they don't talk about everything you and I are talking about. But here's what they do know. They look at me and they say, Greg, something is not right. Mm-hmm. They said things are changing too fast. We need to get back to the basics. They're pulling their kids out of public school to homeschool them. They're saying we need to grow our own food. They're making it illegal now to sell private produce in the farmers markets in some states. And they're making it illegal to pull our own water or we're being taxed if we pull water out of the ground or if it's captured from the roof as rainwater. And they're saying we need to get back to the basics of taking care of ourselves and our community. We don't know what's going on in the world. It doesn't make sense, but we need to slow down and go back to the basics. So that's the other path. And you're seeing both of them simultaneously right now. And sometimes it's in the same household. Sometimes it's the same dinner table. The kids want the tech and the parents want to go back to the basics. So here's what's going to happen. And it'll happen within this lifetime. We're going to do what humans always do. We're going to check each other out. And we're going to say, ultimately, who's happier? Who's healthier? Whose lives are more fulfilled? The people that have followed the tech, given all in on the technological path, the people that have chosen to slow down and go back to the basics. My sense, I'm a realist, I'm an optimist, I'm also a realist. I think we'll probably find something midway. Jean, I think the tech is here. We'll always have some of the technology. The question is, do we become enslaved by the technology, or do we allow the technology to serve us so that we could be healthier, happier, freer, love without fear, love more completely, and stay connected? So I don't think we're going to give up the tech. And I think we may choose, there will be a segment of the population that will choose to allow the technology to serve them outside of their bodies rather than inviting that technology to replace their natural biology in their body. So it's a long answer to a short question, and I wanted to lay that foundation so that we can tie into that for the rest of our conversation. Does that make sense?
Oh, it makes perfect sense. And Greg, I want to go one step further in this, because we sort of kind of established, and I think we're of the same belief here, that, as you said, there is a design, there's a designer, there's a creator, there is something intelligent that created this beautiful, amazing human potential in biology and what we're truly capable of. Now, on the other side of this equation, there is an intelligent design that is creating this technocratic path. And like you said, the point of, or perhaps the distinction is that this other side isn't satisfied with just creating technology that might serve humanity. It wants to usurp it, literally, and alter it to a point of no return. And that's now clear. I mean, the Ray Kurzweils and the people that have been out there saying this very clearly, there's no doubt about it. There is no sugarcoating this. Because we are at war, because I don't want to push my view on anyone else, but I feel like I'm not getting the same courtesy from the technocrats, right? They're pushing hard. So what is...
You mean, John, are you saying the dark forces aren't being nice to you? Is that what you're telling me?
Yes, that's what I'm saying. So what kind of force are we dealing with? And Greg, this is a multifaceted question, because you can go into another dimensional realm, or you can go into perhaps even another species. To the best of your ability and your experience, what are we dealing with here? Because I think it's important to know that.
Yeah, I'll answer that on two different levels. It is complex, and it's also really simple, Jean, very, very simple, because life is simple. Nature is simple until we make it complex. Science is actually simple until we make it complex with symbols and equations and really big words. The principles are really simple. So I'm going to tie back into everything I just said. There is a battle that is playing out in our lives. It's not going to happen. We are in it. And the only way out of it is to go through it. We get to choose. We have to go through it now because we're in it.
Be like the buffalo. Walk through the storm.
Exactly. But I think the question is, do we come out of this battle with a soft landing, or do we come out with a harder landing? When we talk about a battle, people typically think in terms of fighting. And what I want to say really clearly is the way to win this battle is not about fighting. Because if we fight against the things that are happening, that is what keeps us stuck in the ancient trap of the polarities that lock us into this age-old battle. The way we win this battle is by living the best version of ourselves. When we become the best version of ourselves, when we embrace the deep truth of our divinity and we live that divinity day in and day out in our lives, then we are no longer living in the fear that keeps us in powerless, feeling powerless and helpless as these ideas and these alternate agendas are being proposed. I mean, it's happening. There are policies being written right now and laws are being enacted that are based on very dark agendas, and we all know that. So I want to be really clear about this as well. We all know there are times we have to fight, and there's a warrior within every one of us. We had to fight. If we had not fought during World War II, when it reached the point that it did, with the Hitler's conquest of Europe, by the time it reached that point, we had to fight. Now, there are places before that where that whole scenario could have been avoided. But the reason that it happened is because people were disempowered emotionally, psychologically, mentally, and with the ability to defend themselves. Those nations gave away the freedoms that we have today, and they gave away the ability to protect themselves and the people that they love. And when they gave those things away, they opened the door to what we saw happening. So we all know there are times that we have to fight. And I'm not saying that we will never do that. What I'm saying is on this spiritual level of divinity, when you love freely and you free yourself from the shackles and the bonds of that fear that embraces so many of our friends and neighbors, what that does is if you're not living in that fear, then you are no longer vulnerable. You're no longer susceptible to those other ideas and those other visions. I'm a huge fan of Buckminster Fuller. Some of our viewers probably don't even remember him because I think he passed in 1982 or 1983. But you probably know who he is because he's probably best known for his architectural ideas based on the geodesic dome. So if you see geodesic homes or buildings, that was, they call them buckyballs. That was Buckminster Fuller. And I was working in the Cold War industry, Jean. A lot of our viewers may not know that. Not by choice. There's a whole story of how I ended up where I ended up. But I ended up working in the defense industry during the Cold War as a senior computer systems designer for a project called SDI, Star Wars Defense Initiative, and another project called Peacekeeper, which was actually anything but peace. It was a missile system. And it was during that time I was reading Buckminster Fuller. And he said something that was so powerful, one sentence that stood out to me. And he said, "You'll never change the world by fighting against the things you don't like." He said, if you want a better world, he said, find a new way that makes the old way obsolete, and people will follow the new way and the old way falls away. And I think there's a lot of truth to that. And I think we may see it in this lifetime. I mean, what happens if they throw a war? What if they throw a war and nobody comes? Nobody shows up. I'm seeing young people. I know young people today that are having a change in consciousness. They love this country and they would fight if this country were ever attacked, or if their families were ever attacked. But to go on,
I would go. I would do that.
I would as well. And to walk onto the land of our brothers and sisters in another nation and to hurt or kill them because we're being told to do that. Something has shifted in their consciousness, and they say, we don't want to do that. We don't want to do that. And so we're seeing this happen right now. There is a shift in consciousness, and it's tricky because we need both. We need to be able to defend ourselves, and we need defenses on the one hand because we're living a paradigm that we've already built. On the other hand, we're moving into a new paradigm where we're operating on different levels, higher dimensional levels, higher psychological levels. And we're experiencing that now. We're living fifth dimensional warfare. We're in the war right now that is a psychological and a mental and an emotional, a very primal emotional battle that is playing out. Rather than imposing the new world upon us, we're being led through fear to make the choices that lead to the world. That is the agenda and the vision of people like the UN and the WEF and things like that. So it's a really interesting time. And it's a powerful time. And I think our greatest defense that we have, how you win this war, is you become healthier than you've ever been. Don't succumb to the crap that they're trying to feed you through the media. I just drove down the street in Santa Fe. I love my city here. And I looked, and building after building after building was crappy fast food. And I said, if they're going to put the time and energy into building a brick and mortar structure, and you're going to buy things to sell to people, why not sell them something that's good for them? And it was just, and I'm not going to call out any one. It was all of them. It was all heavy, battered, fried, saturated fat, one after another. And then you look at what's happening. It's not just this city. I see it in a lot of cities I go to. And then you see the uptick in obesity and diabetes and hypertension that are called comorbidities when a bug comes around. And then you say, are these coincidences that these things are happening? And by living the best version of ourselves, we consciously walk away from that crappy food, because we're just covering so much ground. I'm going to go back early in my career, and I still do. I studied an ancient sect called the Essenes, Essenes. I know a lot of your viewers know who they are. Jesus was of the Essenes, as was his mother. And when I was reading some of the Essene texts back in the 1980s, there was a conversation that Jesus, and when I talk about Jesus, this is a learned man who also is a spiritual figure, but just as a learned man, he was sharing things in his time that were radical ideas. And by the way, the Essenes did not know themselves as the Essenes. They were known as therapeutae because they knew how to heal the body. And so when his disciples asked him, they said, "Master, what is it that we should use to nourish our bodies?" The way he didn't give them a list of do's and don'ts. He gave them a principle that we can apply in our lives today, Jean. And what he said, the things that kill your food kill also your body, and the things that give life to your food give life to your body. Therefore, eat only the things that give life to your body. Man, you can't get any clearer than that. You can't get any clearer than that. The stuff that comes out of a processed machine has never seen the earth. It doesn't know what natural food is. And this is what many people are using to fill their bodies. So part of our divinity, as we awaken to this extraordinary potential, to the fact that we are the product of an intelligent divine intervention, we were given abilities through our genetic blueprint that no other form of life are given. And to honor that, why would we want to put anything into our bodies other than what would nourish that gift? And I know it's a very different way of thinking for some people, but that is how you win this war. You win the battle by becoming the best version of yourself. And that's different for everyone, whatever that means. I'm not saying there's one way of living. It's just when you are able to thrive and love, and this is important, to love yourself fearlessly, because that's what gives us the power then to love others and to do things for other people and to give of ourselves for other people, because we are so full with our own love. If we're lacking our own love, then we're always trying to get. When we are filled with the love and the respect, because with that love comes respect for our gift. When we respect ourselves enough to love ourselves to our greatest potential, that's what frees us to be at our best. And that's where we can help our brothers and sisters in ways that's very, very difficult when we're suffering on our own.
Clearly, the physical health, it's also always a reflection of our spiritual and our emotional health. And one thing I think you're very familiar with from your own story, and unfortunately, the vast majority of people are today, is that it isn't just the present feeling of fear that is being injected from outside of us. There's also a deep and now multi-generational trauma that we keep passing on that keeps us from connecting with life in the way you just mentioned. I know you come from a very difficult upbringing as well, as I said, many people do. There's a systemic traumatization has been going on. We are now realizing that trauma is at the root of all of our suffering, and that both aggressors and victims in the human realm are usually the victims of previous trauma. How do you see in your traveling and with your healing work that you do, because that's what you really do, is the healing work with people? How do you see the liberation and what happens to people when they heal from that trauma?
Well, thank you, John. John, and again, you just covered a lot of ground there. First of all, the travel. I am traveling a lot, more than I typically would, and I don't make this a habit. I mean, I've always traveled a lot for the work I do. I'm honored to be invited onto stages and platforms throughout the world, and to be with my global family. What's happening now is I'm still playing catch up for the events that were postponed during COVID. And only now are the venues that we were committed to in 2019, 20, 21, 22, they're available now so that the producers can actually follow through on the contracts. They are contractually obligated to produce these events, and they can't do it if the speaker's not there. So yeah, I'm traveling quite a bit. In a joyous way. And to do that, I have to be the best version of myself, because my promise is to be present, to be focused, and to be the best version of myself when I step onto that stage for the people that have trusted me to change their lives to come see me. They've spent money, they've taken time away from work, they've taken time away from their families. Many of them have traveled by air, sometimes to other countries. It's my way of honoring those people. And in that way, we celebrate our humanness together. And it's a joyous thing. It's a lot of fun. And you and I are both musicians, and I think we're been musicians probably in past lives. And we bring a lot of beautiful music as well as deep truths to these events. So I guess what I'm seeing, the generational trauma, what I see is this, at least in our audiences. We know that this is a pivotal moment in the history of our lives, of our nation, of our civilization, of our planet. We know this is a little window. It's a rare, precious opportunity in this little window of time to create the energy that is moving into, and that the new world will be based upon, that foundation. We are all the product of trauma. We are a traumatized society. We are a traumatized civilization. We're still living the trauma. My family trauma. I am half Hebrew blood, not Jewish faith, but Hebrew blood, and half Cherokee blood. And on both Cherokee and Hebrew side, there's a lot of trauma from Holocausts that happened within the last 150 years. And what we know, this is so fascinating, John. This is what we do from the stage. I can show this to people, how the emotions create a chemical residue that we now recognize. They're called neuropeptides in the body. Every emotion creates a neuropeptide, and those neuropeptides want to metabolize and pass through the body, and normally they do, unless they are the product of trauma and fear, and then they cannot metabolize because the emotions haven't been resolved. They haven't been reconciled. So what happens is those neuropeptides actually attach to the organs and the tissues and the glands that we associate with that trauma. Nurturing, for example, in the feminine often is associated with breasts and uterus, and you see the uptick in uterine cancers and in breast cancers and things like that. And there are studies being done linking those. You can't say one is the cause of the other, but there's a high correlation between trauma, unresolved hurt, unresolved fear, and the sense of the lack of the ability to nurture, and how that links to some of these conditions. So what I see to answer your question, what I see on my stages is our community, Jean, we don't want to take our hurt and our suffering and our trauma into the new world. This is the opportunity to heal the generational trauma that has led to the suffering that we see now, so that the new world that's emerging, it's going to be a cleaner world in terms of the emotional residue that we're carrying in there. And people consciously want that. They want to heal the generational trauma. So how does it happen generationally? I mean, I've had people say, well, I didn't have any kids, so I'm not passing on the generational trauma. Well, here's what happens. Those neuropeptides actually, the DNA in our cells is encapsulated in a protein, and that protein responds to trauma. When the trauma is unresolved, the protein locks down on the DNA. It's called spooling. There's a term in biology. It's called genetic spooling. The protein will lock down on that DNA and prevent the DNA from its fullest expression in the presence of trauma. If there's a conception, if people have a baby, they will pass that spooling on in the sperm or the egg into the offspring, into the child. That's how you transmit generational trauma. And then the child will be born with the same spooling, or with that same tightness around the DNA that prevents that full expression until that trauma is resolved. So this is fascinating. I mean, sadly, where a lot of this comes from is they're now studying children. The civil war in Syria has been happening for so long that now the refugee camps are generations in duration. They've been there for generations. And so now babies are being born in the refugee camps, and their mothers are so traumatized. Their mothers are passing that trauma onto the offspring. They have the brain size is smaller, body size is smaller, cognitive disabilities. All of that is from the generational trauma. Chemically, biologically, it's passed on. So even if you don't do that in the field, we're also passing that trauma, because that we are all linked through our biology to that field as well. So what I'm seeing is that people are aware of that. They're conscious of that. They know that they have the opportunity, and they want to heal. And there are a lot of different ways to go about doing that. A lot of different ways. But that's again a long answer to a short question.
Oh, I love the long answers, because you built a journey that encompasses and brings everything together. So please do not shorten those answers. But that's one thing that you just said, is that we see Christine and I host a retreat twice a year, the Yada retreat, you're the One retreat. And one of the things we see more and more often is also there's a certain age group a little higher up that tends to come to the retreats, is this sentiment of it stops with me and something new begins with me. And this is what so many people really want. We see this in family constellation therapy, how beautifully you can resolve even trauma that is multi-generational. You don't know nothing about it. It shows up, it presents itself, and it can be resolved. So like you say, the tools are emerging from all areas, and they're becoming available. And I believe this is over the next years and decades. The trauma healers, the people that feel called to help others and facilitate that healing, I believe this will be one of the most important professions over the next years and decades.
It is right now. I agree. And just for our viewers, I mean, it's beyond the scope of what you and I can do here. I mentioned there are many pathways. The family constellation is really, really powerful. Heart-brain coherence that is pioneered through the Institute of Heart Math and some of the techniques they're doing is very powerful. There are techniques of breath work, where using breath to lubricate those neuropeptides, you don't have to even know what the trauma is, but you will lubricate those and allow those neuropeptides to metabolize and pass through the body. And we do this in our programs, and it's fascinating because those neuropeptides contain micronutrients and trace minerals, depending on what the trauma is. That's what they're made of. And as those neuropeptides are being released, people say all the time their mouth tastes like metal, or their breath will smell metallic. Mm-hmm. And they'll pass it through their tears, through their urine. They'll say the urine smells funny. And I'm not surprised. It's because these neuropeptides, as they are leaving the body, they carry with them those trace minerals and the mineral residues. And it's all part of our biology. But Jean, nobody taught us. You know, I was in school back in the 50s and 60s. I wish someone had shared these things with us. It's a very different way of thinking. There were people that knew it. It just wasn't commonly accepted. And it's being a little more commonly accepted now outside of mainstream education. Climate change is a big, big conversation, and it's going to become bigger. You know, as a scientist, Jean, I have to say, I always, when I was a kid, one of the things that I aspired to, when I knew I would either be a scientist or a rock star, and I wasn't sure which. I tried the rock star thing first. And, you know, and I enjoyed it.
I think you are a rock star scientist. Let me put it that way.
Well, thank you. So I'll share a story. In 1967, I went to a concert with a group. At that time, they were called Jefferson Airplane. They then became Jefferson Starship. I was in love with the lead singer, Grace Slick. She stood on that stage, and I was in the front row, and I proclaimed my love. I said, "Grace Slick, I love you." Of course, she completely ignored me. But the point was, I looked around in that it was an indoor stadium, and there were maybe 30 or 40,000 people in that stadium. And what I saw, that a few people on that stage could do something that would change the lives and move the hearts and souls of those 30 or 40,000 people. But I also saw something else, and I noticed this really early on, because when the music was over and we were leaving that stadium, people wanted to have that feeling again, but they needed something outside of themselves to recreate the feeling. They needed, at that time, it was a vinyl album or an 8-track tape, this crazy technology. They needed that to recreate that feeling. Well, at the same time, I had another experience. I saw a man who passed not long ago. His name was Billy Graham. Many of our viewers know who Billy Graham was. He was an evangelical speaker, and I can't say I was on board with 100% of everything he said, but I recognize this, that he was speaking to 70,000 people in an outdoor stadium, the Kansas City A's athletic stadium. And he moved the hearts and souls like the Jefferson Airplane did. Here's the difference. When people left, they didn't need something outside of themselves to have the feeling, because his words had changed the way they felt about themselves, and the change was lasting within them. They didn't need something outside of themselves to carry that change into their lives. So I recognized that early on, and I said, there's got to be, you know, either through music and the words in the music, or through the precision of the words that are so powerful. And you know, may I take a moment and just say something about words? Can I say
anything you want to say, Greg? Anything.
Well, I'm just going to invite. Thank you, John, and I just want to invite our viewers and our listeners. If you've never thought about this, we speak so commonly, we don't often think about what's happening. We are such a highly advanced, technologically sophisticated, soft technology. That's what we are. We're not computer chips and AI and chemicals. We're neurons and cell membranes and ion potentials moving across cell walls. And we self-regulate through thought, feeling, emotion, belief, breath, and focus, and language. So when we speak, think about what you do every time you speak. I'm going to look into the camera at our viewers, because you breathe the breath of life from the world around you. And in the most intimate act you can imagine, you invite that breath to penetrate into the deepest recesses of your being. So you take something out there and you bring it in here, and then you begin to flutter your diaphragm to compress that breath in just the right way to send it back from where it just came from. And as it reverses the course and follows back up through the windpipe, that breath flows over the vocal cords, and we vibrate the vocal cords in just the right way to reflect the emotion and the thought that we are having in our being, so that we create the acoustic patterns to convey those emotions and thoughts as those waves leave our body and they fall on the eardrums and on the surface of the skin of another being who then interprets what it is that we've just experienced through those acoustic patterns. And it's never 100%. The interpretation will approximate. That it'll never be, you will never feel what I'm feeling precisely the same when I say it, yet we communicate this way. And I will never feel precisely what you're saying because we're not the same being. This is such a sophisticated experience, and we don't even think about it, Jean Nolan. We don't even think about it. And it's a reminder of how extraordinary we are. And I think we owe it to ourselves to understand who we are before we give ourselves away to the technology. Because once we do that, once we replace our biology with synthetics, our body begins to atrophy those abilities. Neurons think they're no longer needed if they're replaced with a computer chip. An immune system thinks it's no longer needed if there's chemicals that mimic that function. Cell membranes, sensors in the skin. And once that happens in one generation, the next generation, the cells, they say, oh, yeah, we used to do that. I'm paraphrasing a cell. We used to do that, but maybe we don't need to do that anymore. And this is how you lose a species. It's exactly how you lose a species. And it can happen in a single generation. We are such an extraordinary and precious form of life, and no one tells us that, John. And I think we're worth preserving it, at least understanding what it is that we're about to give away to the technology before we give it away.